Welcome everybody back to the Full Stack Chat podcast. This is a live podcast that goes out on YouTube and X.com, where I invite builders from the community to talk about what they're building, some of the struggles they might have encountered while building it, and then we'll give you some advice from somebody who's actually built and launched something in the field. So if you're interested in starting this off yourself, at least you have a place to start and have some friendly faces to go along with it. My name is Brian Morrison. I am a developer educator at Clerk, a user management and authentication platform that is designed to get auth up and running in your applications as quickly as possible. But I'm also a full-time developer. I've been in tech for 15 years, and I'm super passionate about everything tech. So today I'm joined by Max Diamond, who is a full stack developer from the UK and longtime member of the full stack community. Fullstack.chat has actually been around since I think 2020, and I think you might be one of the OG members of the community. So seeing you build and launch a lot of cool things over the years. But with that, Max, I'll pass it off to you to give the audience a little bit of an intro about yourself.
Thank you for the introduction. I mean, it's not much more to say than that. I mean, I build projects every now and then. Some of them I launch, some of them I launch for like a week or two, and I take them down. And some of them get hundreds of users or thousands of users.
Yeah, that's a fantastic goal to move towards. I think even several hundred users is pretty cool. I'm going to start the show, as I always do, with a little bit of an icebreaker, just to kind of ease into the conversation so people can know a little something unique, surprising about you that maybe you don't necessarily talk about, but nothing too personal. So my question for you is, what was your first programming language that you picked up? And if you could go back and do it again, which one would you choose instead?
Oh, my first programming language. Well, I used to write like Bash scripts when I was a teenager, like cool little, like text-based games in the terminal. I don't think I'd go back and do that nowadays, though. But for my first like proper language, it was C#. I don't know how I got into it, but I just heard it existed, decided to try it out. Again, I don't think I'd go back to doing that either. But I think now that like newer languages exist, I'd stick with the newer languages.
Nice. I think I knew that about you. Again, we've known each other for some time now. And C# was my first like professional programming language. And like you, I just kind of fell into it. I have no idea why I decided to pick it up, but I just kind of did. And it all kind of went uphill from there. So that's awesome. Thanks for that. Now, we're here to talk about Manchester Trams, which, correct me if I'm wrong, is an app that is deployed both the App Store and the Play Store that lets people within Manchester, and I don't know my geography, so correct me, please, if I'm wrong, track information about trams kind of in real time. So this way they can plan their rides and plan their days. Is that all accurate?
Yes. We have like a Metrolink tram network around the city. And like to neighboring towns and that. And yeah, the app, we have a bunch of stations. I think there's about 99 of them. I didn't count. And we can just go to those stations on the app and see when the next trams are due from all the platforms there.
Yeah, that's fantastic. That sounds like a really useful utility for people who live in that general area. What was kind of the inspiration behind building such a tool? I think most people, especially like developers and who might be interested in building things, are going to go more towards something like, like a project management type thing, or we were talking before the show about CRMs. That seems like a pretty natural tool for developers to build. But you went with something a little bit unique. So where did that idea come from?
Yeah, well, surprisingly, it came from just a need of needing the app. We hear a lot of developers talk about their successes are things that they needed, and so they built for themselves. And I needed an app to check when the tram times were. So I moved to the city a few years ago. Didn't know anything about the trams. Hopped on a tram and ended up lost about 10 minutes later. So I just didn't know where I was going. And yeah, that's where the need for it came from. Is I got lost. I didn't know which station's connected to which, I was like, oh, if I could just look it up on my phone, it would be amazing. So
Awesome. And I think I might be pulling from memory about this from our chats within the Discord community, but I think your app is more popular on the various app stores than the official ones that were created by the town. Is that right?
yeah, so there was the original like Metrolink app. I've forgotten what it was called. And that had like based on ratings, the apps do a lot better. So the original one was something like 2 stars, 3 stars. I launched mine, and I think it's currently sat on about 4 stars. Way less like users and downloads because obviously I'm going up against like some government department that has a huge budget. But in terms of ratings, I get a lot of reviews that say stuff like, way better than the official apps, and then 5-star ratings, 4-star ratings. So it's pretty cool having that against, that little victory against the official app.
Nice. So stack wise, what are you used to build? What did you use to build the app? And I asked this kind of selfishly because I'm just now kind of dipping my toe into the mobile app development space, something I've wanted to do for years, and I'm finally doing it. But I know there's a lot of different solutions, whether you're building something completely native, there's React Native, there's Ionic. I think Apacer.js just came up in another recent conversation I had with another guest. What did you decide to use, and what was your process like coming to the conclusion to use that specific framework or language or stack? I imagine there might be a back end there too. So just walk us through some of that.
Yeah, so the back end I can get out pretty quickly. There's various government like Department of Transport APIs out there, and they're all in XML. So I had to write some API wrappers around that to transform it into JSON so that the mobile apps could consume it. The mobile app was, as this was my first app that I was building, I wanted to choose sort of like the easiest option, the thing that I knew. I definitely wasn't gonna go native and use anything that Android Studio or Xcode used. I just wanted to use web technologies and then bundle it into those platform specific apps. So for this, because I already knew Vue back then, I just went with Ionic with Vue on top.
Okay, and then so you went with Ionic. Did you explore any of the other ones, or did you just kind of like know right away that Ionic was going to be the one you wanted to jump onto?
It was a mix between the two. So I looked at other ones. Obviously, React Native is I would say it's probably the most popular one that people build apps with. But because it was React and I was sort of adverse to React in the beginning, I just stayed away from it. I also checked out Flutter as well, but there was something about that shied me away from it. I think it was the fact, like the way that the syntax for Flutter is a bit different compared to what we're used to. So I just stuck with what I knew pretty much.
Yeah, yeah. For those of you who have not worked with Flutter, from my experience, having dove into it a little bit, because it was one point where I was kind of exploring building something with Flutter. It's just like a ton of nested classes, like all the way down. It creates this very interesting looking pyramid triangle structure in your code that can be a little difficult to reason with. And I say that with being a little naive and working with Flutter because I have never done anything big with it, but I could totally see why that would be a little bit of a turnoff. Okay, cool. Now, you also build web apps because you mentioned that you wanted to build something using the web technologies you're already familiar with. How would you compare the process of building a mobile app and launching that into the various distribution stores versus building a web app and just kind of throwing it out there into the internet?
Yes, it's like a night and day difference between the two, I think. Web apps nowadays, we can write some HTML, run a command, and it's deployed to Cloudflare or Vercel or wherever. Mobile apps, they're still very, I would say archaic in a way, in that you have to sort of run them, build the web version of them, then compile them into the Android version, and then do a bunch of like Android specific changes. So like, if, for example, if you want access to the camera, you're going to need to open the manifest folder in Android Studio and say like, okay, I want a user to have access to the camera microphone. There's a lot of like little finicky things like library package compatibility in that. There's a whole like extra huge step after you build the web version to get it actually running on a device afterwards.
Okay. Yeah, interesting. Again, just kind of diving into the space myself, I'm noticing the same thing. It's like the approach to like building and pushing things out is different. One of the struggles that I'm kind of in right now is I think my app that I'm building is totally working pretty well, minus a crash report I just got about yesterday. That's the first one that I've heard of, so now I got something to look into. But I think the fact that I kind of have to pre-create all of my marketing resources, like screenshots and the verbiage about the app, does make it a little, I guess it raises the barrier a little bit to just getting something out there for people to work with. So definitely resonate with that. Now, what are some of the challenges outside of like the differences of distributing it out to the app stores? What are some other challenges you encountered when you were building and launching this app? And that could be specific. That could be specific to building and launching mobile apps, or it could just be kind of curveballs that got thrown your way that you weren't quite expecting when you were trying to push this thing out into the real world.
Yeah, I think my biggest difficulty with this, aside from the apps, was just sourcing the data for it all, and sort of figuring out how to piece all that data together so that in the end someone has access to all the stations and the real-time departures for those stations. So I had to go to various different places on the internet to source this information from. Obviously, the local department of travel I had to go to. The actual like department for transport, pull some data from that. And it was all in various forms as well. Some of it is like CSVs, some of it is like JSON files, like really old XML format endpoints as well. And then it's like just putting a massive data jigsaw together, getting all that information together, and then verifying it as well, and then throwing it in a database somewhere. That was definitely the biggest issue.
Okay. All right. Very cool. And now what are some of the neat features that are built into the application now? And what kind of things do you kind of have on the roadmap for people who are interested in trying this out themselves?
Yeah, so I said it's probably the coolest feature that I like is the nearest station detector. So you just open the app, it's one button, it finds the closest one to you. That was something I've never built before because I had to work with like coordinates and figuring out distance between those coordinates. And then everything else is pretty much what you'd expect from a transport app. Being able to see the stations, what lines each of these stations are on, and then the real time departures is something that it is coming. It's already in the app, so you can see the next 3 trams that are scheduled for each platform. But I've just done like a huge migration to build a new set of endpoints so that we can get more like scheduled departures for up to an hour from now. So people will have even more data, even more like scheduled trams to look at.
That's great. And do you have any plans for a web version, or does a web version already exist? And perhaps I missed that.
Yeah, so the web version's always been a bit of a weird side to the project because ideally people are going to look at this on their phones. They're not going to open the web version. But for a while, a proper web version did exist. as I hadn't launched it on iOS for a while. I had like a ton of users asking me for an iOS version, and I just kept pointing them towards like a very poorly written version on the web. Nowadays, you either have the choice of Android or the iOS app, and the web version is more just like a drop down. Like I've got like a marketing landing page for it, and then if you want a station, there's just like a little drop down at the bottom with those times on it. But it feels like a nice like the ultimate web solution in a way of just having a landing page and nothing over the top.
Yeah. Yeah, building. They asked this. There's two reasons why I asked this question, just for context. So, my most recent guest, he built his application Chessbook first as a web version, and then commented about how he thinks it helped him guide the direction of the platform and get feedback quicker than would have occurred through a mobile app. And as someone who's building an application mobile first, and then potentially going to branch into a web, I was interested in getting some feedback on people who have actually done this too, and just to see what their feels are about it. Awesome. What would you say? And this very well could be the nearest the location tracker, but what would you say is kind of your favorite feature that you've worked on?
I guess there's a few of them. The location one is definitely probably the top. And then like you can favorite stations. I sort of have like you have the departures, and then there's like a section next to it where you can see other journeys that people have been on. So you know, if you want to go from station A to station B, there's like a whole journey builder that will tell you which station to go to, which tram to get on to get to that place. And then when you go to those, like that station on the app, you can see like, oh, popular places or popular destinations from this place, with a list of like stations that people have been to from the station that you're at. Not exactly sure what kind of real world usage that has, but it's cool to see like, you know, where people are traveling around the city. I guess like behind the scenes as well, one of my favorite features is there's some like in-app analytics that I've put in, and you can see on like football days, because we have two stadiums here. On football days, like there's a huge spike in traffic for the trams, and then it like drops back down again the day after. That's also pretty cool to see.
That's awesome. Yeah, for my fellow Americans, I think soccer is what we call football out in these parts. That's great. And you know what? The feature about finding nearby hotspots, it actually does sound pretty cool. I could see tourists using that to find if they're in a specific location, if they want to take a tram from one spot to the next, just to see what other things are in a general area that they can experience. So that's awesome. Do you use when you're building features, when you decide what you want to create and add to the app, do you use any kind of analytics or feedback tools in order to kind of like gather data from your community that's using the app to decide like what you think is going to get the most use, or it would be the most popular?
I can't say I use any tools specifically. I have like a feedback form in the app that people sometimes put some stuff through. A lot of the feedback that I've got is from Reddit, so that's like how the app got so popular. It's just by posting on Reddit a lot. I get a lot of feedback from there. A lot of the times it was just people asking for the iOS app. And apart from the feedback, like a lot of stuff that I build is just for myself in the app. So like as a as a regular user of the trams, I'm like, yeah, I think, you know, I'd like to be able to see this thing on the app, and then I just build it. And then what I tend to do is sort of like build first, then check the analytics, and then if it does get use, I keep it, and if it doesn't get any use from those analytics, I remove it. So it's kind of like a backwards process. It's not what you'd usually do when you build apps.
No, but I guess, you know, for people who are developing things independently, especially if you're your own customer, I mean, you ultimately are going to get some use out of it. So I think that is a very interesting and unique approach. And I say unique more from the standpoint of, I don't think we talk about that enough, but it probably is more common than we think, you know?
Yeah. So, like sometimes I think what I do is like I add features that I'd like to see in it, but I tend to set constraints to the app as well. So like ultimately what I don't want to do is just become a copycat of the existing app where it feels bloated, you get crash reports all the time. So I'll build features and then check the analytics. And if it's not getting any use, I just get rid of it because there's no point keeping those features in if no one else is going to be using them. And then like the main constraint is just keeping it simple. Like it shouldn't be like several clicks to get to where you're going. It's exactly why like your favorite stations is right on the homepage, so you can just click straight through to your favorite station, see the time, and get on the tram. These constraints sort of like keep the app so simple and help me like innovate in a way. Like I wouldn't just build a huge feature and stick it straight into the app. I have to think through it and say, okay, I need to keep it simple, so this is how I'd do it instead. So yeah, I find setting constraints is really important as well.
Yeah, that's solid advice. On the topic of advice, we're coming down to the end of the show. We're at 20 minutes after the mark, which is where I usually try to start wrapping things up. So we're going to end with one final question. But before we do, I just want to encourage anybody who is watching right now, if you have any questions for Max and want me to ask them directly, so this way he can share his expertise with y'all, drop them in the comments, and I'll try and get to them before we wrap this thing up. But with that, my final question for you and for all of my guests is if you have any advice for other developers who are interested in building and launching their own products, services, etc., what is the one or two pieces of advice you would give them?
I'd say firstly is build for yourself. Like if you have a need but you can't find something to fill that need, then go ahead and build it, plan it out, and start building for yourself, because you'll find a lot of interesting things, different use cases that like existing solutions won't have, that you'll want to build for yourself. And I'd say secondly is just start Googling stuff. Just, the first thing I asked myself when building this app was, does this data exist and can I get hold of it? And several Google searches later, I was sitting on all that data and saying like, okay, now how do I actually do something with all this? So I mean, that's a good starting point. It's just Googling stuff.
Awesome. I love it. I love the common trope that the more senior you get in the development space just means you've learned how to Google better. And yeah, that does
Yep.
that totally feels like the truth, right?
Pretty much, yeah. It's most of my career is just Googling things now.
Pretty much. Or ChatGPTing them, or Vercel V0ing them, or whatever. It's just finding the information and figuring out how to put it all together. So with that, Max, where can people find you if they want to connect with you?
So I'm on X. I think my handle's already in the title anyway. I have a website at maxdiamond.co.uk. And I think that's it. You can join the full stack community. That's where me and Brian are most of the time. And I think that's it.
Awesome. Just to clarify, your handle is on X is DMDBOI. Is that right? Just for people who are listening after the fact. Awesome. All right. Well, with that, let's go ahead and wrap this thing up. Thank you, everybody who joined today to share the conversation I had with Max about his experience building Manchester Trams. If you are interested in joining the community, as Max suggested, go to fullstack.chat to join a little Discord we have. It is a small group of friendly developers who chat about life, as well as building and launching things, whether it is to the public or potentially internal at companies, or even their own little personal projects. We all just kind of help each other out to accomplish our goals. But with that, I will see you all in the next episode of fullstack.chat. Thank you so much for stopping by. Take care.